Hello friends! Taking risks as a filmmaker is, well, risky, go figure. It can often feel like audiences want to dislike a film before it even hits theaters, and the balance between showing people something fresh or making a film so ridiculous that moviegoers laugh you out of town and force you to make videos pointing out flaws in other people's movies is something that's always there. This week on Heat Vision Breakdown, we take a look at the fine line between cheesy and charming, and the films that have managed to walk that tightrope to greatness. James Wan is a director who knows a thing or two about having a vision. The filmmaker launched 2 separate horror franchises over the past 2 decades, Saw and the Conjuring universe, and also helmed, if not the fastest, at least the furiousest of the Fast and Furious franchise. Wan's films are fun, and his sense of style behind the lens has solidified him as one of the most sought-after directors working today. But there is no doubt that some of his work can be viewed as a bit cheesy. Now, before you yell at me, it's not necessarily a bad thing. If you can genuinely say that watching The Rock break out of an arm cast while saying, "Daddy's gotta go to work," isn't both the most ridiculous and simultaneously the most badass thing you've ever seen, then I don't think you have a soul, legally. With his upcoming take on Aquaman, Wan has shown, even through the small amount of footage released thus far, that he is not afraid to lean into the more over-the-top aspects of a character who communicates with monkfish. Following such dour fare as Batman v Superman, Trial of the Century, and last year's Justice League, a colorful, action-packed romp through the open seas may be exactly what DC needs to get back on track. And while it may seem ridiculous or garish to include the likes of a towering lava crab or put Willem Dafoe in a man bun, Wan seems to have once again struck a chord between the authentically charming and the tawdry. Yes, tawdry. I own a thesaurus. Wan is hardly the only director to inject cheesy elements into his movies and have them work beautifully. In fact, an entire decade was built on the concept. The 1980s, a time when films about grown men partnering with young high school boys in incredibly dangerous situations, was the premise for multiple blockbusters. Temple of Doom, Back to the Future, Karate Kid, kinda, are loaded with cheesy films that also happen to be classics. Take Steven Spielberg as a prime example. Undoubtedly one of the most beloved and commercially successful filmmakers of all time, much of his work could be viewed as a bit schmaltzy at times. Schmaltzy. From flying bicycles powered by love, to Indian Kate Capshaw riding an inflatable life raft down the Himalayas, without him losing his hat, I might add. There are certainly a few moments that make audiences think twice, but the overall films they live in are still classics. Meanwhile, films like RoboCop, Big Trouble in Little China, Roadhouse, and Top Gun, specifically the volleyball scene, are all chock full of ridiculous one-liners, practical effects, over-the-top action sequences, and other factors that lean heavy on the corny nature of movies, but they all still manage to be fun viewing experiences, and are even considered fine cinema depending on who you ask. RoboCop, in particular, looks at poverty, authoritarianism, and the corporatization of America in a thought-provoking way that feels relevant today. And that was decades before Citizens United. Even Walt Disney described himself as corny. And to be fair, the guy who made Chitty Chitty Bang Bang kinda deserves that label. But he also said that there's just about 140 million people in this country that are just as corny as I am. Perhaps the best example of good cheesy is Nicolas Cage, an Oscar-winning talent so divisive that there's an entire Community episode dedicated to the question if he's good or bad. Spoiler, he's good. Really, really good. Part of what makes Cage's performances in movies like Con Air, or The Rock, or Mandy so good is that he's 100% committed to his job. You just want to watch him and see how he'll react to situations around him. Sort of like when you put a dog in roller skates or on a skateboard. The key to making a cheesy movie work is tricky. Sometimes a film is released and it is panned by critics and fans, like Flash Gordon or the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but over the years can grow into a phenomenon. Other times, audiences can willingly lean into the joke of the film, as is the case with many of the Fast and Furious films, Snakes on a Plane, or even Tom Hardy's Venom. It's also important to note that cheesy is still a negative term in many instances. The fact that visionary directors can elevate hokier themes in their films to lofty levels is a testament to the mastery of their craft, but many, many, many more examples of the opposite exist, and most of them are video game movies. Street Fighter, Assassin's Creed, Double Dragon, Dead or Alive, the list is long and it is rarely fun. When Mortal Kombat is the best film on any list, you know you have issues. The Rock is perhaps the greatest example of a man who toes this line. He understands cheese, after all he has shared this photo of himself more times than I can count. It's a good photo. But he may be an example of too much of a good thing. Over the past 12 months, Dwayne Johnson has starred in 3 films with outlandish premises. Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle, in which he played a teenage boy stuck in The Rock's body, was a monster hit. Rampage, in which The Rock played a guy whose gorilla best friend became super tall due to a science project, sure, was a modest hit but didn't really excite critics or audiences. And finally, Skyscraper, in which he plays the world's foremost skyscraper authority, fighting terrorists in the world's tallest building. Actually, wasn't that cheesy in its execution, but it failed to live up to box office expectations and quickly faded into obscurity. Hard to believe. The truth is, you'd be hard-pressed to find any director who would actually label their films as cheesy, even Uwe Ball. But a tongue-in-cheek film with hokey dialogue and childish or over-the-top action does not a bad film make, necessarily. As with most art, it comes down to the skill and finesse of the creator behind it. There is no magical, mathematical formula that explains why watching Indiana Jones jump a minecart over a lake of lava is awesome, while seeing him survive a nuclear blast in a refrigerator is idiotic. But if there was one, you can be sure whoever wrote it would win the Nobel Prize, and deserve it. Until that day, we can all enjoy just a little bit of cheese with our popcorn. So what are some films that you think are cheesy in a good way? Let us know in the comments right down there, and join us here every Friday morning for new episodes of Heat Vision Breakdown. By the way, cheesy isn't a bad word, it's a Gouda one.